Good evening and welcome to the Card Fellas podcast show. I'm Chris. He is Matt. And don't adjust your screen. There's like palm trees behind me. I'm in Florida. I'm on my family vacation and we're talking some hockey.
Yeah, we're talking hockey while you're on the beach. And a little bit jealous because where we are at, it's still technically spring/fall. At least it feels like it. So must be nice to have sunshine on your dome and an opportunity to see a little bit of warmth because man, it's brutal up here.
You know, it's funny though, is we were in the Clearwater area today, which you drive right through Tampa, and there are signs everywhere saying "Go Bolts." So, we are in Florida, but two of the best teams in the NHL call this state home, and I was in one hockey town today in Tampa, so they were excited about their Bolts, as they should be. They keep winning cups. So
absolutely, and I'm in the state of hockey. You're in you're in the state where hockey is king when it comes to the best couple teams in the league or two of the best. So thought it was a good time to talk hockey, and we're going to talk about a year that a lot of uniqueness to this year. We're talking about 2005, 2006 Upper Deck hockey. That's going to be the set we're going to talk about today. And if you're not a hockey fan and you don't know much about the sport, I think this set is really a unique, as I mentioned, but just a cool story behind it. Also, the names from this set you're definitely going to know, and so it's a good set even if you're not a hockey guy, hockey gal, hockey collector. So hopefully you stick with us, and we'll share some of the uniqueness of this set.
Yeah, for sure. This is a set that even if you're not a big hockey fan, if you watch Sports Center or shows like that, you're going to recognize some of the names in this rookie class. And it's kind of an interesting rookie class because there wasn't a set the year before.
Right.
There was a labor shortage. There was no hockey season and no cards. And part of that whole labor dispute had something to do with cards. It was those licensing fees. The players wanted a bigger chunk of that, and the owners obviously didn't want to give up that chunk. They really wanted a salary cap. That's what the whole thing was kind of about.
Right.
But part of the players' contention was getting some of that licensing cash sent their way. So cards actually had something to do with that labor dispute. But what ended up happening is we ended up with two rookie classes in 1 year of cards.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible couple of years with two guys who are still playing right now, but will go down as all-time greats, will go down as two of the best who have ever played the game. So pretty cool in that regard. Both of those guys ended up in different series, though. So there was a Series 1 and a Series 2, and Sidney Crosby was in Series 1. Alex Ovechkin was in Series 2. But lots of other good rookies in there as well. Henrik Lundqvist played for the Rangers, played goalie. They called him the King. And I think that Henrik will probably get that call up to the Hall of Fame. Corey Perry, who is retiring this year in that set. Duncan Keith, his rookie card as well, all in Series 1. And then in Series 2, you had Ovechkin, Getzlaf, and Thomas Vanek. And I think that Getzlaf's another guy. Actually, Getzlaf's the one who's retiring right now, isn't he?
Yes.
I get those guys confused. They both played for the Ducks. But I think Vanek probably, I think, is maybe borderline. I don't think he'll be a Hall of Famer, but definitely a really, really good hockey player for many years.
Yeah, you teed up this set really well, and it is unique. And I use the term unique like 4 times in my intro. It's because of what you said. I mean, there was a labor shortage. So what you ended up getting was just a ton of young guns. And the legends of the game, as it would become, include two of the guys in that set, as you mentioned, Crosby and Ovechkin. The thing that was unique about this set was you had number 1 draft picks from 2 different drafts with young gun rookie cards. And Upper Deck had been known for many years for producing these young guns rookie cards. But what ended up happening is they started to make those as the years went on they started to make those more short prints. And so you would only get one in every 4 packs. And so finding those packs or finding those rookies in those packs became more and more difficult. And then when you look at how many, let me find my number here, 83 different young guns were in series 1 and 2. So like it wasn't one of those things where if you bought a box, you were, guaranteed to find an Ovechkin or a Crosby. Like there were a lot of young guns. So when we're talking about short prints, and then we're talking about the likelihood of you landing one of those specific players, it was very uncommon. So if you were able to pull one of those Ovechkins or Crosbys, that was like a lotto ticket back then. And then when you look at some of the other names that you mentioned, and there were some other guys that had some success and had some notoriety and had a little bit of buzz when they came in the league. There's a guy named Dion Phaneuf, who was he bounced around, but Ottawa Senators guy. Zach Parise, Ryan Suter, a couple Team USA guys, of course Minnesota Wild as well. Those guys were part of some really, really interesting teams. When I say interesting, mostly like Team USA. They're Wild teams, as you can see right here. Didn't get very far, so we know them. Another one, Jeff Carter, Mikko Koivu. Those guys all had rookie cards in that set. Now, whether they were drafted in 04, 05, those are the differing. But they're very, very big hockey names, familiar names in this set. So that's what made this set such a fun set to look into, because until you dig into it and get beyond the Ovechkin and the Crosby, you start to realize, like you mentioned, Chris, there was a labor dispute. It was revolved around cards, and it was then the next year you have 83 young guns. And one thing that, if you were a hockey hobbyist back then, and I don't know how many there were, I could probably count on 2 hands how many were in the hobby at that time collecting hockey cards, but there were only 2 young guns in the previous year. So like this was a opportunity for hockey fans, truly hockey, like the true hockey fans, to get back into this hobby, and they did it with a bang with this set. But let's talk about like this era of hockey too. That's one of the interesting things about this set, because if you remember this, Chris, and if anybody who watched sport at this time, hockey was essentially dead, and it was dying. I don't know if you remember that, Chris, back during this time.
Yeah, it was not as many goals scored. It was a little slower game. I remember going to the Western Conference Finals with you. We went to go watch the Wild play the Canucks, and you brought up Zach Parise, and that was the name that I didn't throw in there. But he actually did win a cup with the Devils. That's who he was drafted with, and then ended up coming over to the Wild in a contract that probably caused another labor dispute. But
right,
another story for another night. but yeah, it was definitely a little bit different game than what we see today, and I just I think the sport is growing so much now, and people see how exciting of a game it is. It's become really easy to sell, but it wasn't so much at that time.
Yeah, and let's get back to the stars in this set, like the true stars. I'm talking about super stars: Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin. So those 2 guys. Let's start with Ovi, and he was obviously this Russian phenom, and he comes here and makes an immediate splash, and he becomes the Great 8, and he's this guy that is an automatic, just like Hall of Famer legend, and then the year after, you get this kid, once in generational type of talent in Sidney Crosby. And so they kind of come into the league at the same time from a hobby's perspective, and give you again perspective on where the league was. Now, Wayne Gretzky had retired 5-6 years prior to this. Mario Lemieux, I think, this might have been his last year. He had come back from his Hodgkin's diagnosis, returned, but then retired about this time. You had Marc Messier was kind of either out of the league or I think he had just retired. And then you didn't really have a face of the league at this time. And if you go back and look at cards from about, I would say, 2000 to about this time, there was not much that you wanted to collect. And, even like the Gretzky in the LA Kings jerseys, that was about the last time people started collecting, or last time people really collected hockey cards. And so there was this gap where the hobby and the hockey world needed some of those superstars. And those guys came onto the scene and they automatically they turned heads. Like Sidney Crosby was the face of the NHL right away. And in fact, on series 2 of this box, he was the guy on the box. So like Upper Deck put their money behind Sidney Crosby. And so when you look at everything of where this was, they were coming out of that labor dispute. So they had lost some maybe casual fans. And then you start losing some of these superstars that have been in the league for so long and helped build the league up, gone, that now all of a sudden they're giving birth, if you will, to these new stars. And so when you look at all that, and then like you mentioned, the king, Henrik Lundqvist. I think he was a legendary goalie. And then you look at Corey Perry, Getzlaf, who's just retiring this year, Zach Parise, Suter, Duncan Keith. They had some really long, strong careers. So this is one of those things where I think when you look at the changing of the guard in the NHL, it happened with this crew and it happened with this set, which makes it really fun to look at too from that perspective. And when you look at the set, you look at what the cards look like. They're very sleek looking. Upper Deck did a really good job of putting some color in there, some borders. The opportunity to make them shiny when a lot of cards were still with those white borders and used to the Topps cards, but they were colorful and they were we're looking at some of the cards for those of you listening on the podcast. They had the rookies underneath, they had the name embossed there, they have great large photo of the player in action. So Upper Deck really did a good job of evolving their cards, and this set really kind of propelled them to be the young guns rookie hockey set once and for all. This really, I think, solidified Upper Deck as the flagship for hockey rookies.
Yeah, it's a set that I think when people go to collect, that's going to be the one that they go after as far as modern cards are concerned. And we can talk about that a little bit. It wasn't too long ago, the Series 1 was actually more, people wanted that more than Series 2 because they wanted that Crosby card. But I think it kind of goes back to, like that Tom Glavine, Greg Maddux Sports Center commercial where they say chicks dig the long ball, the goal scorers. And Ovi, usually this year he's leading Crosby in points. Usually Crosby leads in points, but Ovi leads in goals. And the Ovechkin card is definitely more demand behind that card than the Crosby card now. So the boxes are a little bit different now. I was just looking this evening at eBay, and Series 1 boxes can be had for about $1,200, and Series 2 boxes about $1,600. But you talked about going on the hunt for these young guns cards. It's pretty tough to pull one of these because in a hobby box you're getting 24 packs. And you're getting, so it's a young gun every 4 packs. So you're getting about 6 young guns per box. And like you said, the checklist is pretty expansive. So, you may have to open 4 or 5 boxes to get one if it falls kind of the way the odds go. So, if you're looking for one, the retail boxes are actually a little cheaper. They do not have all the inserts and those types of things that the hobby ones do, but you do get more packs, so a better chance you're going to get about 7.5 young guns in a box, and they're actually less expensive than the hobby boxes. So if you want to go hunting for those young gun cards, the hobby boxes are the way to go. But it's still going to be pretty darn expensive to chase one of these things down. So I think if you're looking, the other thing we should talk about too, and is these Upper Deck hockey cards, and we showed what they look like. They're tough graders. All of them are tough graders, and that's something that I know that you like to get into.
Yeah, and actually, you know what? You'd think that looking at these cards, but I'm going to give you some of the pop reports, and these cards must have been printed or created differently because the gem mint rate is pretty high actually for this. So, as you mentioned, the Alex Ovechkin card has surpassed the Sidney Crosby card as far as value is concerned. A PSA 10 Sidney Crosby sells for around 3,200 to 4,000. That's a recent sale. Ovechkin's up to about 7,500. So he's looking, I think as Ovechkin starts to march toward Wayne Gretzky's goal mark, like all-time goal scorers, I think that's what kind of propelled it when people started to extrapolate how he's doing now over the next 3 or so seasons. They think he might break it. I don't know if it's next year or the year after. So there's kind of a path to him breaking that. So I think that's why Series 2 became, more desirable, and why that Ovechkin card is starting to get, start to pull away from Sidney Crosby. But let's get back to the numbers. So of this set, there has been 6,320 cards graded. Of those cards graded, 3,600, almost 3,700 of the cards have received 10s. So we're talking about over 50% gem mint rate, which I thought was really high. When you, like you said, Chris, you start looking at it, there's a lot of potential for etching or soft corners because of these, but apparently these cards held up really well. The Ovechkin card has been graded 2,033 times. 1,016 have come back 10s. So again, that's about 50% right there. The Sidney Crosby card, 1,300 times graded. Just about 869, not just about 869 are now 10s. So that's about, we're looking at, that's over 50%. So this is an interesting set when you look at it from that perspective. Corey Perry, 150 cards graded, 94 of them are 10s. So you're looking at anywhere between about a 50 to 60, in some cases like 70% gem mint rate. So I've not seen these cards in person to see what they're like, truly their card stock and what it looks like, but that seems really high to me for an upper deck card, especially ones that, like you said, have that those printing and all the way to the edges. This to me, I found these numbers astounding, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm gonna put out a theory. I like to put out theories about this.
You do, and they're usually damn good. So I'm always looking for this one.
My theory on this one is that I'd like to see what those pop numbers looked like 2 years ago. My theory on this one is that those cards were mostly submitted before the pandemic boom, when people really paid attention to what they were sent in. And then people went and chased these cards through wax and probably didn't find them to the point that they wanted to find them to be able to submit them. And, in the last 2 years, people, I think, if they were to get these cards in their hands, probably would just fire away and send them in and just be like, hey, whatever we get, we get. Because that's really what's kind of been happening in the last 2 years. And maybe those pop reports come from, before this pandemic boom. And, I think that hockey, is the one thing that's been easy to find throughout the pandemic. I mean, they were cards that I was buying for my children in the last 2 years because we could get them. And I just don't think that, all of this that's happened in the past 2 years have propelled these hockey cards the way that they have in other sports. And I'm going to say my theory is that many of those cards were sent in before the boom, and they were looked at pretty extensively before sent.
Yeah, I think that theory's right. I think the probably the only two guys that maybe have been sent in more recently were the Ovechkins and the Crosbys. But I think, like you said, the majority of those were sent pre-pandemic. I think if you did have either of these cards and you didn't, maybe you sat on them like you and I sat on a bunch of cards that we didn't know about grading before the pandemic. Like we knew, but we didn't really know how to do it. like I could see guys like us having these in their collection, then all of a sudden getting them graded. And like I said, when we talked last show, we talked about Upper Deck, we talked about Bowman football, Brady's rookie season. I think people, like we talked about, people didn't know to hold on to the Bradys and protect them right away. I think everybody knew right away to protect the Ovechkins and the Crosbys when they were pulled. They knew that these guys were generational talents, especially if they followed hockey. Like, you knew that Sidney Crosby was a thing when he was 12, right? You knew Ovechkin coming over from Russia was going to be a thing. Like, these guys were legends of their sport before they even got into the league. So if you pulled this, if you were a hockey fan, you were putting this into a sleeve, you were protecting it. So I think there's something there to be said about how these were handled early on. And I think you're right, Chris. These were probably cards that were pulled in 2005, 2006, handled right away. And if you were getting them graded, in that moment, you were a true hockey fan and you were a true hobbyist at that time. So I think that theory is accurate. And I don't know how many of those boxes, and I didn't really dig into deep, see how many were online, but I found them pretty easily online. Yeah. So it tells me that they're still out there. It's not one of those. It's not one of those. Those quote unquote vintage boxes that are so scarce. So maybe people are still pulling them, and I just think, I think just the interesting part of how these cards held up is a testament to Upper Deck changing maybe their card stocks, or making a little bit more of a commitment to making sure that the cards came out right for the collectors.
Yeah, I think it would be a pretty tough deal though, just to, you're talking about $1,500 for a box, and then you're getting 8 cards in a pack, 24 packs for a box, so 192 cards in a box, but you're really only getting 6 young guns. So if you're going to go after those, I think it's just impossible.
It's a pipe dream for sure, right? I mean, it's a lotto ticket, but it's an expensive lotto ticket still. We're not talking like, you're going to buy a box for $50 and you might get a $1,000 card. These boxes are, like you said, $1,200 to $1,600. And when you said what'd you say, 192 cards that you get? Cards so Series 1, there were 242 cards. Series 2, 245. So you're not getting a complete set. We mentioned the 83 young guns. So you're not guaranteed to get one of the stars. You can get 6 or 7 duds that had no impact in the NHL, and now all of a sudden you're out a lot of money and you're sitting holding 192 worthless cards. So, I know it happens in the modern era cards with, the ultra modern. People will spend $1,200 and, not get their money back. But, I think, Chris, you've taught me this. You're the person who always like, okay, let's look at how many cards you get, how many cards are in the set. Like there's some strategy to it. And I think this one gets a big fat hard 2 thumbs down, if you're chasing this. If you really want this Ovechkin card or you really want this Crosby card, go buy it.
Right. The odds of you pulling one, I mean, you're talking probably a close to $10,000 investment to be able to pull. And again, you're not chasing an Ovi and a Crosby in the same box. They're in different boxes. The raw card right now, the Ovies are going for about $1,250. The Crosbys are going for about $1,000. But we named all these other guys too that you could possibly get. But to compare that, like a Lundqvist raw card, $65. So
a 10 of his is like $500.
Right.
So it's if you're collecting 10s, like I always go to the highest because that's kind of how a lot of people think. So if you're looking for a 9 or a raw card, you can get that probably for anywhere between 60 and 100, like you said.
Yeah, 9s are going for 175. And if you want an OV and you don't mind having a 9, it's the price of a box and a half. $2,500 will get you an OV and a 9. $1,800 will get you a Sid and a 9. So
yeah, and I think I think when we talk about hockey cards, I know we're talking to a very small group of people. That's the other part when you look at the number of cards graded in this from this set. Alex Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, Lundqvist, Getzlaf, Perry, Keith, Parise, Phaneuf. Those are the guys that's in order of cards being graded. And Dion Phaneuf is the eighth most graded card at 102. Parise's seventh, 102 as well. So, like, I mean, there's just the hockey hobby is really interesting. I mean, you really have to be a fan of the sport. And again, you and I live in the hotbed of hockey, being in from up north. And so it's just interesting to me to continue to watch the hockey hobby lag behind all the other sports, including soccer. And I think that's really telling about where the sport is. But I also know that it has a very passionate fan base, and the people who do like hockey really, really like hockey. And so if you can find the people who really, really like hockey and who are hobbyists, that's your target market. But, if you're looking to sell these cards, it's a very niche market, the hockey community of collectors.
But what we found, though, I think, though, is that even though obviously more product is getting produced than a few years ago, but you look at the cards that are getting produced, we look at the Kaprizov stuff, that's all going for big dollars.
Yes.
People who are into it are into it. Obviously, the numbers we talked tonight were not small numbers. $7,500 rookie card that was produced 15 years ago in a PSA 10. I mean, that's pretty good dollars there. So there's definitely people who are into it and love it. But I think one of the things, and this is something that I talked a lot with my kids about over the last few years, because we've been, the kids understand what flippers are and what they do and how this whole thing works. But I would say to them, hey, this hockey thing is very similar to the baseball cards that I grew up with, in that you can get them and you can build a set and there's different options. They really enjoyed doing the MVP, the Upper Deck MVP set,
right?
Because those sets, when you open the packs, were just loaded with stars because the set size was smaller. So instead of having 15 cards or 20 cards from each team and showing you a third or fourth liner, you're only showing the best 5 or 6 players for each team. So they would open the packs up and they would be loaded with stars, and they really enjoyed that. So there's just different ways to collect these hockey cards, and to be able to find them in stores is awesome. To be able to get cards. And if your child enjoys hockey, likes playing, or just likes watching it, that's a sport that you can get into because you can find it. I mean, even in our area, which is hockey crazy, you can walk into a Target right now and find
it. Right. Yeah, you mentioned the MVP brand from Upper Deck, and they're loaded with stars. And I just think that's an awesome. I just think that's just such an awesome way to introduce kids to collecting, and and introduce to a new sport. You and I don't follow baseball as much as we used to, but we're still buying baseball cards because the whether it be the designs, whether it be we're not doing it necessarily because we're going to land that 1 of 1 or we're going to do this. It's we like the cards, we like collecting, we like opening, we like being back in the hobby. And so I think I encourage people to try that with hockey. I know it's hard if you're not in a hockey community and you're not embedded in the sport like we are. It is a tough sport to kind of indoctrinate yourself to. But this was like I said, fun to do research, fun to look back at this era of hockey, and the guys we're talking about, they're still doing it at a high level. Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, those guys they're our kids look up to those guys, and we're talking, these are guys that started playing these cards were before our kids were born. So really fun to see guys who have longevity in their career. And there were a lot of them in this set, as we've mentioned. So, great set for that, those journeymen of the NHL that have, helped build the league back up to, a strong standing among the major sports.
When I was young, I could tell you the batting average of basically every player in the major league. I do them all. And right now, I'm really out of the loop, but I love the cards. And my son and I this year we've entered into a fantasy baseball league just to kind of get back into baseball and know what's going on and know who the players are. And if you're someone who's like seeing this whole hockey thing and you're interested in it, you want to see it, what I can tell you is go watch the game live. I did not grow up, I grew up in Northern Illinois. Basketball was king where I lived. And obviously there are people who played hockey, but it just wasn't around me. No one I knew personally played hockey. But the first time I saw hockey live, I went, this is incredible.
It's pretty incredible.
The great thing now is we have so many junior leagues and minor league type of hockey, and it's everywhere. If you live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, you can go watch hockey. I mean, it's pretty much everywhere. And when you get to that level, the tickets are very inexpensive as well. And I would say, go to a few games and see what it's like live, because I think hockey is a sport that if there was no television and you had to watch it live, would be the biggest sport in the entire world. I mean, it's live. There is absolutely nothing better than watching a hockey game. On TV, it just doesn't translate on TV the way it does live. It's so much faster live.
Yeah. So. And I think, just stepping aside, and I think we're probably done talking about this set, but I want to tell you one more, 10 years later, we kind of saw the next era of guys come in. So we have Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid. Those guys are now really the faces of the NHL as Crosby and Ovechkin reached the golden years of their career. And, Austin Matthews just became a 60-goal scorer recently. And his cards, his young gun, is now, shooting up the price ranks. So it's really fun to see hockey cards do this. And as a true fan of the sport, as you are, Chris, I'd love to see it get more involved, more integrated into the hobby, more hobbyists get in there. But, I know that all is, it all relies on other, other factors, meaning like you were talking about, more people watching it, more people going to the games. That usually means more people into the hobby. As you can see, I always have the NHL Network on behind me and a little bit of NBA tonight too. So, hockey's a great sport. We enjoy it. We hope you guys found a little bit of value in this conversation, even if you're not a hockey hobbyist.
Yeah, even if you're just a flipper. We actually just got a comment from a YouTube user here, Poor Man's Investing. And he says, I'm flipping my cheap cards and hockey is flying compared to everything else.
No kidding. I'd love to get more information on that. And, we've talked about this too. I did a video for this, for our YouTube page. I ripped a blaster box, $19.99 blaster box of Upper Deck hockey from this year. And it got a lot of views and a lot of comments. And you and I kind of were talking. We're like, whoa. We've done a lot of rips on this YouTube channel that we have, and we've talked a lot about the cards that we've opened, and that got quite a response. And it was a little bit surprising, and in a good way. So maybe the hockey hobby is more more abundant than we think. But I think the future's bright. With some of the young players. I've said it before, Trevor Zegras, Kirill Kaprizov, and then of course Matthews and McDavid are still young. All those young guns, and I think that's the other part of this, Chris, is their rookie cards are true short prints and they're hard to get. Like, you're not going to be able to find these boxes and just pull these rookie cards out like a lot of other sports where you're buying boxes and you're able to pull out these rookie cards on a little more regular basis. I'm talking just the base, right? Like just the base, Young Guns cards. I think Upper Deck has really figured that niche out. Maybe that's why hockey cards have had that staying power when it comes to the Young Guns brand.
Yeah, finding those is a real tough thing to do. Pretty much wherever you go, whatever you're going to buy, it's a tough deal. They do have these sets, though, and you've seen them, of course, in stores now, too, where you can get a rookie card of everything. So if you're not the kind of guy that can go out and spend big money in all these boxes, and you just want to hold a Kaprizov card, you can go out and buy these little rookie box sets, and it's not the Young Guns card, but it does get you something going right now. So our
And those
guys
sell for like $25, right?
yeah.
They're dirt cheap. It's funny you mentioned that because my son saw one of those. He's like, "Are those Young Guns?" And I go, "No, sorry, you're not going to get a box of Young Guns for $25." But I like where your head's at.
Yeah. So you just said 90s Gretzky's, Yager, Lemieux, even the newer cheap inserts are selling. So
That's great. That's great to hear. And I you and I, Chris, we've been to card shows, we've been places, and we gravitate towards the Gretzky's. Like we look at those, like you and I both love those old hockey cards, and there's the 80s with I think I've said it before, like the richness of the blue and the orange of the Oilers on those Gretzky cards are like, just take my money. I'll give you my money for those cards. I just love the look of them, and he's the GOAT.
Early 80s Gretzky's cards, to me is so much value there, because those cards, they didn't make a ton of them, and you can get them for under $20 all day long. And it's a good time to see that stuff, and some of the designs are cool, and everything about them, in my opinion, is very cool. Before we wrap up, we're about ready to go to playoff time. Who do you like for the Cup this year?
I'd be kicked out of my state if I didn't say the Minnesota Wild, but I don't know if they're going to be the favorites. I've liked the Colorado Avalanche. Again, as a Minnesota fan and a resident, I might get kicked out of the state for saying that. Always look for the state you're in right now, Tampa Bay. They always bring it in the playoffs. I'd have to say Tampa Bay and Colorado are probably my two teams. I think Colorado figures it out and wins. But don't sleep on Calgary. I think Calgary is a team that could definitely disrupt some things and go all the way to the Cup. They've got some guys, Johnny Goudreau, speaking of stars, coming back into his own after kind of having a couple off years, or at least one off year. And so he's back. That team is fun to watch. They've, Tkachuk, they have, it's going to be bonkers. The NHL playoffs are always absolute bonkers. And so I'm looking forward to that. And I would say if you were to ask me right now, I'd say the Avalanche are going to hoist the Cup here in I suppose it's June. I know there was a pause because of the Olympics. I don't even know when the Stanley Cup Finals are, but it always goes into like June. It might be July this year. It's so crazy. How about you? Give me your picks.
Yeah, my son. My theory is defense wins in the playoffs when things get tough, and I really have a hard time choosing a team with a goalie named Darcy. But Colorado is just so tough to stop. Right? They can score so many ways that they're my pick, and I like Tampa in the East as well.
We didn't even talk about. We didn't discuss this. It's kind of sprung this on me. We got the same teams.
Yeah, we have the exact same teams.
What could go wrong?
What could go? It would be nice to pick Minnesota as that's our team that we love, but
here for people who don't know, have you watched Minnesota sports? We can't have nice things here. Period. So even in Minnesota, we're not fair weather fans. We're realists here. We ain't winning the Cup.
Yeah, I think Kirby Puckett wouldn't let it go into the Metrodome after the Super Bowl or after they won their World Series. So, it's been over. But they're going to have to play St. Louis, which is always a tough matchup for them. And then if they win that, they're probably going to have to play Colorado, which I just don't see them beating Colorado as well as Minnesota's playing right now. I just don't see them beating Colorado. So.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's all about getting tighter in the playoffs. Things tighten up so much, and that's where some of those tougher, stronger defensive teams. And I just don't see the Wild being that. They could lose in the first round of St. Louis very easily. And that's, you got teams like St. Louis, Nashville, Colorado. They're just built differently at this point. The Wild tried to get there, but I just don't know if they fully got there. And so it should be fun to watch. Hope everybody enjoyed this hockey talk. I know we did. And, if you didn't enjoy it, we'll talk about another sport next week. So
next week we're back to baseball.
Back to baseball. We'll figure out which set we're going to talk about. But, 2005, 2006, Upper Deck hockey, 83 Young Guns cards in Series 1, Series 2. That, to me, was bonkers. So if you're going hunting for Ovechkin or Crosby, good luck, my friends.
Yeah, just go buy it.
Good luck.
But what I wanted to say before we wrap up, though, is, when you're talking about hockey cards, and people say this all the time, and we're going to talk about the soul of collecting in our next show, our next shorty. If you want to go back to old school collecting, this is probably as close as you're going to get in 2022 as in the hockey market. So if you're looking for the soul of card collecting, I think you'll find it in hockey right now.
I think that's a great point. You're also going to find it in Topps baseball. I think it's bleeding into baseball, but I think hockey has been the most accessible, no question about it, over the last 3 to 4 years while people are getting back into this. So, it'll be fun conversation. Hopefully people will be able to listen to that one too. And we always like to say this too. If you're listening on our podcast, we do have a YouTube channel. It's called The Card Fellas, obviously. We do a live show every Wednesday night where we talk about the set. So we actually, we have some visuals. Also on the YouTube channel, we do rips, like I said, quick rips where we, take different boxes, wax packs, whatever the case may be. Sometimes our PSA reveals, sometimes our SJC reveals, and we open them on, on camera and put them up there for you. And then if you watch this on YouTube, go to our podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, search Card Fellas, we'll be there. So we're trying to make this worldwide, prestige worldwide. We're like the Step Brothers guys. We're like Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, but for sports cards.
Investors, you.
That's a good way to end it. I like it. It's always good to chat, Chris.
Yes, sir. Very good to talk to you. For Matt, I'm Chris. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.